Hello and welcome everyone, it is me, the Naval, also known as the Power to Do This, back for you with another deck profile and another Morphtronic one at that. This one kind of showcasing a neat little tech choice I have been experimenting in the last couple of days. The first card you are seeing in this deck list here, the Iris Swordsoul. Didn't really make its way into its own archetype, but she does have some fairly interesting implications in Morphtronics that I will be talking about in this video. Showcase you guys a kind of sample combo line, and then, kind of leave you off with some final thoughts. So first of all, what does the Iris Swordsoul do? Well, it's a level 8 spellcaster with 2500 attack and defense points that during the main phase allows you to, if a monster is on the field whose effects are negated, special summon herself from the hand. This is also a quick effect, funnily enough. And her additional effect is that if your opponent special summons a monster, you can activate one of the effects depending on where that monster was summoned from. If the monster was summoned from the hand, you can summon a monster from your own hand. If the monster was summoned from the deck, you are able to draw 2 cards. And if the monster is summoned from the extra deck, you are able to destroy one of those monsters special summoned from the extra deck. A very neat array of effects that also explains why she didn't really find her way into Swordsoul, as none of these really work with, what Swordsoul attempts to do. The only thing being that you can summon her if you Chi negate an opponent's monster. But, there's some neat things you can do with Morphtronics. You also have a similar interaction between her summoning condition and the Shijao effect with power tool Braver Dragon. Braver Dragon, as a negate, only negates that monster's effects and does not destroy the monster. So if you use Braver Dragon to negate an opponent's monster, or you can technically negate your own monsters, you can special summon the Iris Swordsoul from your hand, which is kind of neat, to be honest. And the other interesting parts come not only from her level, because she's level 8 with one of your many level 1 tuners that you're running, you can easily make Braver Dragon, but also because of Small World. You do have some rather easy lines, not only from her into Morphtronic Engine, but also from Morphtronic Engine into her. Because she's a light, she, shares that attribute with Scopen. And Scopen, the only thing that Scopen has in common with the 3 fonts you're playing is being a machine monster. Also works in reverse, so, if you have an additional phone in your hand, or potentially even it's only the phones, you can, reveal a phone, send it, reveal the Scopen, send it, and add the Iris Swordsoul. So you do have some opportunities to not only get from her to Engine, but also from Engine to her. So she is surprisingly accessible. Otherwise, the deck is fairly straightforward. Playing 3 Morphtronic Saffron, revealing a, top cards equal to a die roll, special summoning a Morphtronic monster from those. I've talked about this guy a lot of times on the channel. I think long-time viewers will know what most of these cards do. Then we have 3 copies of Morphtronic Saffron, the second in line of the front trio. A special summonable level 1 tuner. By banishing a Morphtronic monster from your graveyard, you can special summon this guy from your hand. And similar to Saffron, roll a die, reveal that many cards from the top of your deck, and can add 1 excavated Morphtronic card to your hand. Gives you a few more search options, mainly the extenders and convert unit and repair unit you're running. So that is very nice. And then the new guy, the infamous guy, the loopy boy, Morphtronic Telephone. While in attack position, you can roll a 6-sided die, gain some life points equal to the die roll times 100, and then special summon a Morphtronic from your graveyard with a level equal to or lower than the result. The defense position effect is kind of a neat foolish burial. You will see that used in the example combo I have later for you guys. 3 copies of Morphtronic Remoten, some nice targeted searching by banishing a Morphtronic from your graveyard to add 1 with the same level from your deck to your hand. Simple as that. And Scopen is here, as not only he fits a very nice niche with the attribute being light, but also as another level 3 tuner and possibly a level 4 tuner if you summon this guy in defense. Gizmek Naganaki is a very interesting card on this deck, as it allows for the most small world bridges in the deck, because with Naganaki, most Morphtronics can get you to Saffron, as revealing Remoten in hand, revealing Naganaki in deck, gets you to Saffron, which is just very nice, and if you're opening Naganaki, you do have the fun interaction that you can, use the Naganaki, and grab back face down banished monsters you have banished off of Small World. So you can maybe experiment with like a couple more Naganakis, but I think 1 works perfectly fine. If you draw it, it still works, and if you don't, it's a Small World bridge. 2 copies of Gadget Gamer. I've cut this down to 2, mainly because I think it's very high rolly. It's definitely one of the best normal summons the deck has access to. because of how much it does. Because on normal summon, this adds you 1 level 1 machine monster from your deck to your hand. Basically grabbing you Telephon, since this way you have a 1-card Power Tool Dragon. Grabbing you Cellphon if you already have Telephon in hand, which enables some cool lines. Definitely one of the better 1-card combos in the deck. Basically the only one, to be honest. Just because of how much it does. You can also tribute this and then special summon a Morphtronic monster from your hand and special summon a Gadget Hauler from hand or deck. That is why we are running the 1 Gadget Hauler. But it's of course very susceptible to hand traps. That's why I cut this down to 2. You still want to see this regularly because it's a very, very, very good card. But I don't want to, mainly rely on this. We are mainly trying to, combo off of Cellphon and Telephon in this one. For, ways to find those 2, we have a copy of 1-for-1 here and 3 copies of Small World. You need a doctor's degree to understand how this card works. So basically, you reveal a monster in your hand, choose a monster in your deck that has 1 trait in common with the monster in your hand. Those traits being type, attribute, level, attack, or defense. So, as previously mentioned, if you were to reveal the Iris Swordsoul in your hand, you can reveal a Morphtronic Scopen in your deck, because those 2 only share the fact that they are light attribute. And afterwards, you can add from your deck to your hand 1 monster that has, again, one of the following traits in common with the monster you revealed from your deck. So if you revealed Scopen, going into that example again, as your 2nd card in your deck, you can add a copy of Morphtronic Cellphon to your hand, because the only thing Morphtronic Cellphon and Scopen have in common is that they are machine monsters. The attribute, the level, and the attack and defense value do not match. And yeah, that's how Small World works. If you want like a full video explaining some Small World bridges for the deck, do let me know down below. For extenders, we are playing a copy of Monster Reborn, fairly straightforward and no explanation needed here. 2 copies of Convert Unit lets you target a machine monster you control and apply effects depending on that monster's battle position. You either special summon a Morphtronic monster from your deck if the monster was in attack position, and then put your target back on top of your deck, helps you cycle some more soft ones per turn effects. Maybe recycle a Cellphon, recycle a Telephone, and so on. It's very cool when it comes to those explications. And then the defense position effect that you change the targeted monster to attack, and if you do, you special summon a level 4 or lower machine monster from your hand. Very niche effect, but still came up once or twice while playing this card. 2 copies of Junk Box, just a revival spell for a level 4 or lower Morphtronic from grave. Gets destroyed in the end phase, but it probably won't make it there anyways. 3 copies of Machine Duplication back on this. Main targets, of course, being Cellphon and Telephon, but I do find Cellphon a lot more useful than Telephon because I am not playing that many links in the deck. Playing a Caught by the Grave just because it's a very, very good card against hand traps. So, the deck really hates those, so we're playing it. The 3 Braver equips that we're playing are Life Extreme, which allows you to potentially have a quick effect pop at your disposal with your Braver Dragon wrapped in a Supreme Magic Blade for some targeting protection, and United We Stand just because big number goes brr. You can also probably play like a rare Metal Silver Armor in this slot for the targeting lock with the wrapped in a Supreme Magic Blade, but United We Stand just is, cool, I guess. 3 copies of Reaper Unit closing off the main deck. A very good extender you can easily grab off of OG Power Tool Dragon, as it is an equip spell that allows you to send a Morphtronic monster from your hand to the graveyard, select a Morphtronic in your grave, special summon the selected monster, and equip it with this card. For the extra deck, we are playing a OG Power Tool Dragon to grab us those equip spell, a Power Tool Braver Dragon to have, a good end board boss to make in archetype, a Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon in, those very corner cases where we can bureau-proof ourselves, but also because he's a good, just generic, fairly easy to make 8 in the deck to end on, because Power Tool Dragon just so happens to be a level 7 Synchro monster, an FA Dawn Dragster. This can probably be a Baron if you have it, but I, don't have it, so I'm playing Dawn Dragster here. A Naturia Beast, one of your main endboard pieces, locking your opponent out of spells, is just very nasty, and you can easily make this, especially with the help of Morphtronic Earphone, which is, a very good level 4 Earth Synchro monster that you can make to easily facilitate Naturia Beast. Skipped over the super heavy Samurai Swordmaster Musashi here. Lets you add a machine monster from your graveyard to your hand, but if you already have a spell trap in your graveyard, you cannot summon monsters or activate the effects of monsters with the same name as the one you added back. My favorite thing about this guy is that you can, potentially add back a Telephon for a follow-up turn to go maybe for a big link play on the follow-up if you have a fully set up graveyard, which is very nice, and I highly appreciate this guy for that. 2 copies of Formula Synchron. I think the second one is far from necessary, but I do like having it. Gets you additional draws. You're easily able to make this by cycling, Telephon and Cellphon over and over again. So it's nice for that. For the Link lineup, we're playing an Underworld Goddess, 2 out untargetable idiots, a Boros Sword Dragon as our Link for close-up, could most definitely also be an access code, and a close-up, one of your main endboard pieces, a Nightmare Phoenix for some utility, a Platinum Gadget for some possible extensions, and a Linkuriboh, you know, to get level 1s off the board and for some battle protection. If you feel like, those are just 3 cards, you know, I want to lose like 1 or 2 words to. If you feel like you need like additional Morphtronic names, you can play Gizmek Naganaki, you can play Morphtronic Vidion instead of Gizmek Naganaki. Still is a light machine, which nets you some very neat small word lines, because you can go from Remoten with it into Southon, but locks you off the Scorpion line, which is a bit sad, because you don't have an, you know, end target in that. It locks out a few small word lines, but it gives you another name. So it's, you know, a trade-off of, do you want your small word to do more, or do you want to have more consistent reveals? It's just a preference thing, I think, honestly. This or Naganaki, it really doesn't matter. It comes down to personal preference. Can play the 3rd Gadget Gamer. I cut this down to 2, as mentioned. I think it's very susceptible to hand traps. But if, you know, you don't expect many of those, you can definitely max out on Gadget Gamer and, you know, say it's gamer time. Playing an Armory Arm instead of the 2nd Formula Synchron is definitely perfectly fine, but, you know, any other Synchron monster you have lying around or any link that the deck can possibly make will also do the trick. But with that out of the way, I think I'll go over, show you guys a quick, you know, kind of, I guess, example combo for this one, and then we can maybe wrap this one up. And just like that, I've, you know, a small replay here with an example combo. Our hand is looking very stacked, to be honest. And we will, you know, start the combo with Gadget Gamer, because that is the normal summon we found in this one. Going for Telephone here, going for Gadget Hauler. As previously mentioned, we'll showcase the, you know, effect of Telephone to possibly Foolish a, you know, Southon here into rotation, which is very lovely, because you can commit for Power Tool Dragon here, add us our extender, Morphtronic Repair Unit, use the junk box here to summon back Telephone, and then, you know, we can start going off. Telephone summons back Southon here before we turn Telephone and Power Tool Dragon into Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. Southon finds us another copy of itself, which we can use to, you know, try to find something else. Again, turning one of those into a Linkuriboh, so we can have one in graveyard to summon back with our Telephone once we get that back onto the field with the junk box we just used. Triggering the Southon here again, getting a Remoten onto the board, and turning Telephone and Southon into a Formula Synchron. This one's rather important to, you know, go into that Formula Synchron, so that I can, you know, banish the Telephone instead of the Southon with the Remoten there, to grab one to hand, because I do have a repair unit, so I can, you know, start Telephone for Southon again. Continuing here into a 4 material Appaloosa, and as I've, you know, pointed out, we are going to repair unit, discard the Telephone, summon back the Telephone, and since we now have another kind of monster effect protection in the form of Appaloosa, we can turn that Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon into a Power Tool Braver Dragon, before, you know, continuing to Telephone for Telephone and Telephone for Southon. Get a bit lucky here, as I do not only find Scorpion here, but I also find Remoten, which will enable a very funny one, because I can Remoten, banish Remoten to add a Remoten, because now I can small world, reveal Remoten, reveal Naganaki in deck, and add a Iris Swordsoul, and we will pull another funny here, because I will negate my own Telephone, which was already spent to summon the Iris Swordsoul onto the board. We have prepared a lot of nasty interactions for our opponent. We have a possible, you know, targeted monster negate or quick effect pop. With our Power Tool Braver Dragon set up, we have essentially locked our opponent out of spells with an Arturia Beast. And we still have a 4 material Appaloosa to boot, with, you know, Linkuriboh providing some battle protection and Iris Swordsoul giving us either advantage on the follow-up if our opponent, you know, decides to summon from deck, or popping a monster that our opponent puts onto the board from the extra deck. This kind of, you know, is, of course, an optimal hand in which you see it all. But Iris Swordsoul definitely has some neat implications that I probably will give you guys some final thoughts when I see you guys again with the deck list. As, you know, to kind of wrap this one up, I do believe this is a very interesting card to, you know, tech into possibly a lot of Morphtronic builds, as it does have some fairly interesting interactions with a lot of archetypal cards. Not only allowing you to put an additional body onto the board in case, you know, a Telephone or a Southon gets negated, which maybe gives you some advantage for a follow-up or helps you survive until the next turn. has, you know, some cool small world bridge interactions with the archetype just because Scopen just so happens to be the most relevant Morphtronic that isn't Earth, but is funnily enough light, which, you know, lets you some very neat small world bridges into Iris Swordsoul or from Iris Swordsoul into main deck engine. And also just, you know, the aspect that Power Tool Braver Dragon is very easily able to set up the Iris Swordsoul is kind of cool. I'll definitely keep experimenting with this and maybe, you know, show you guys an IRL list once I have that figured out. But up until then, please do let me know what you think of this kind of tech inclusion in the deck. And, you know, if you maybe, as previously mentioned, Small World has some interesting theory in this deck. If you want to, like, maybe see a dedicated video to that, also let me know that down below. But mainly considering her at the top here, the Iris Sword. So what do you think of this inclusion of Morphtronics? Is this maybe something you would be considering for, you know, builds you would like to experiment with in the future? Let me know those things down below. But with all that out of the way, I will thank you guys very much for watching and see you guys again next time. But until then, goodbye.